Just curious here, is there anyone who's clicked on this video who doesn't know what Baby Reindeer is? I began writing this video script not long after they released it, and it began with the words, "So, has anyone heard of this new Netflix show called Baby Reindeer?" After the last god knows how many weeks of media firestorm around this show, I'd be interested to hear what anyone who's heard of Baby Reindeer but doesn't quite know what it is thinks that it is. I'd estimate that anyone who doesn't know what it is would have to guess that it's some sort of reality show. Which, it kind of is. We all seem to have forgotten that there is actually an incredibly interesting work of art at the centre of the millions and millions of articles filling everyone's news feeds about it. And that work of art is a British dark comedy, so it is officially in my wheelhouse. I have some thoughts about it that I want to air, so I hope I can still talk about it in that context and that you're not totally sick to death of Baby Reindeer takes by the time I finish this video. For the hypothetical person who is somehow unfamiliar with Baby Reindeer, it's a comedy drama show on Netflix written by and starring British writer and performer Richard Gadd. And it tells the tale of a struggling comedian who meets an odd woman named Martha who ends up stalking him. At first glance, it appears to be an ordinary dark comedy. The best comparison I can think of is the BBC sitcom Nighty Night, which is about a strange woman named Jill who starts obsessing over the husband of her neighbour when her own husband gets a cancer diagnosis. Nighty Night creator Julia Davis even gets name dropped in Baby Reindeer at one point, but I was thinking about this comparison before he mentioned her. Both shows employ this anti-comedy technique where a strange character will say something disturbing, and then there's this awkward moment as you anticipate what they're going to say or do next that tries to force not a conventional laugh out of you, but a nervous laugh. That would be what you would assume the intent of Baby Reindeer would be if this were any ordinary dark comedy. The difference is that Baby Reindeer contains the following 5 words, which are the main reason it's been setting the internet on fire ever since it got released. Based on a true story. Yeah, this is based on real events that actually happened to Richard Gadd that he is reenacting for us. He's changed his own name to Donnie and other people's names, but this is all basically what happened to him in his 20s, and it is a very difficult watch. Especially episode 4, where the show essentially drifts away from being a comedy entirely as he goes into the details of an incredibly traumatic period of his life prior to meeting Martha. He then does this long monologue on stage about that period, which is just one of the most jaw-dropping performances I've ever seen in anything, because you can tell this isn't just acting. The show has obviously been fictionalised to a certain extent. It's not like this is a docudrama here, things have been changed, partly for legal reasons, partly so its dramatic structure works because real life never plays exactly like a television series, but you could feel throughout Gadd's performance that the essence of this story comes from somewhere real. Although the rawness of his performance wasn't the only thing that made the story credible, it's also the style of the show that makes this feel so real. The editing is very similar to a previous effort by the production company Clerkenwell Films called The End of the Fucking World. Clerkenwell have carved out a distinct style for themselves, and Baby Reindeer works incredibly well within it. It's told in this scattershot way where scenes are linked together with montages and Gadd's narration as he looks at social media, emails, texts. It feels like a fully dramatised version of an article for a website with a title like "I was stalked while trying to make it as a comedian, this is what happened next." What makes this unique and what makes it stand out as such a compelling work though is the fact it's not just a simple good guy bad guy story. The show is actually quite sympathetic towards Martha. She's clearly not well and isn't being looked after by anyone, and is a symptom of the extremely poor state of publicly available mental health care going on in Britain right now. Granted, that sympathy is part of the double-edged sword that gets Donnie into the mess he gets into, but the show emphasises that she's not an evil person. She needs help, and she's not getting it. Baby Reindeer is actually quite a thoughtful and introspective piece about the relationship between the stalker and their victim. The show's full of dramatic irony where Martha's obsession with Donnie ends up getting mirrored by Donnie, and he ends up in psychological turmoil as he looks back over his past and the reasons why he ended up reacting to these situations the way that he did. And that's how you get to the point of Baby Reindeer. Having his voiceover in there not only makes this a more intimate and emotionally arresting piece, it gives you the full context as to why victims of the types of abuse that Donnie was subjected to, first by his former mentor in comedy, then by Martha, find it so hard to report what's happening to the authorities. And giving people an understanding of that context is important work that needs doing, because human psychology is difficult and complicated, and this is a point that people typically struggle to understand. Baby Reindeer's clear intent is to communicate this point, and also to destigmatise talking about abuse from a male victim's perspective, because this is an area that men typically struggle with. It is important for stories involving harassment and abuse like this to get told in a public forum, because they can actively help people outside of situations like this looking in understand why people behave the way they do, and can also offer comfort to fellow sufferers of abuse who are still trying to come to terms with it. Raising awareness of an important issue is a noble purpose for art, and Baby Reindeer has clearly done a good thing on that front. A charity for victims of male sex abuse called We Are Survivors reported an 80% increase in calls following Baby Reindeer, and that's probably the best thing that could possibly have come out of this story. Art was used for a good purpose here. Yeah, it's impossible not to mention the media firestorm, isn't it? While Baby Reindeer's storytelling technique is superb, the performances are incredible, it's brave and gripping viewing, it's also essentially a true crime piece. And being a true crime piece is where we get to the internet problem. Obviously, the second this was put online and gained an audience, as any high quality show on Netflix with the words true story attached to it would, the internet would do as the internet does and track down the real Martha. It doesn't matter if you changed everybody's names, enough specific details of the story are there on screen for people to find her. And obviously, anyone who was willing to do something as unthinkable as that was not going to be put off by the fact that they essentially become a Martha for the real Martha. This phenomenon does kind of underline a trend of media illiteracy on the internet in recent years, because clearly the point of the show is not to encourage mob justice. Mob justice is not something that you should support because the mob gets things wrong, and if you've been following this story, you will know that when it comes to the identity of Gad's other abuser, that mob has gotten a very significant thing wrong. Gad tried to discourage people on the internet from sleuthing when it became apparent that this was happening, but he wasn't going to stop this now, because by being based on a true story, it tapped into the reason why people are so fascinated with true crime, because the context of the story isn't confined to the details inside of the author's head. You can ostensibly go out and create your own fanfiction based on a story you've become obsessed with. As I'm kind of doing right now. I'm not just reviewing a TV show anymore. By talking about the media firestorm, as anyone now has to with Baby Reindeer because it would be incomplete if you didn't, I'm essentially making a hybrid of a TV review and a drama video. And yes, I'm as disappointed in myself at doing that as you are. I'm not going to make a habit of it, promise. It appears to me that Clark and Well and Netflix didn't realise just how powerful the words based on a true story would be. They probably thought it would be effective, sure, but not on this scale, because what they've done is offered people an incredibly tantalising gap in information. If you present people with a gap in information composed of questions like who are the real people that this story is based on and how real is all of this, they are going to have that itch where they feel the need to answer these questions by any means necessary, and the internet has given them the tools to deal with these questions. You've been seeing the power of the gap in information in recent years in other fields, like when artists have tried to remain anonymous. There's this British rock band that's pretty popular at the moment called Sleep Token, who have this thing where they all wear masks and none of the members have names, so they can give their brand this mystique and this lore. Well, obviously people went out to try and fill the gap in information and find out who the members are. The last band that tried to do this was Ghost. Prior to that it was The Residents, who saw a bit more success in remaining anonymous because they started decades before the advent of the internet, where everyone leaves traces of themselves wherever they go. I don't know how you discourage the sleuthing behaviour. Maybe works like Baby Reindeer should come with some sort of disclaimer that people shouldn't go digging. Maybe reviews in the media discussing works like Baby Reindeer should carry those disclaimers. I can see why Gad would want to tell his story, because writers typically write what they know. When you're watching a conventional drama, particularly in drama, whether it openly states it's based on a true story or not, usually there will be at least a scene or two in there that's come from something that's actually happened to the person that wrote it. It will be fictionalised to a certain extent, of course, but the emotional core will have come from somewhere real. That's just how human emotions and creativity work. I can also see why Gad would want the reality of this story known, because the point is destigmatising these discussions of abuse, and anonymising it would kind of neuter that point. The problem though is the current media environment actively endorses the creation of real-world fanfiction by default. The real-life dimension to the Baby Reindeer story is probably why it's going to continue being this huge topic of conversation for a very long time, because the story is still unfolding. The articles and coverage of the drama around it have been going on for ages now, and importantly, those articles also contain the words Baby Reindeer, effectively continuing to advertise the show to more people who haven't seen it yet. The real-world fanfiction is part of the reason why this show hasn't just done well, but has done extremely well. There is no incentive for this to stop. You can point the finger of blame at whoever you like for this, at Gad himself, at Netflix, at Clerkenwell, at any member of the media circus around it. Hell, you could potentially point it at me. I don't exactly have a big platform, but I am contributing to the media circus just by talking about it. But if we didn't talk about Baby Reindeer, how else do you destigmatise discussions of the various types of abuse featured in Baby Reindeer? Anonymise it is the obvious answer, but if Baby Reindeer was anonymous, then would it be anywhere near as remarkable? Would We Are Survivors have gotten an 80% increase in calls if Baby Reindeer was anonymous? Then again, does that increase justify its existence? I don't really have a definitive answer to any of these questions. My point is, the question of how to tell a story like this in an ethical way is going to keep coming up whenever something like Baby Reindeer happens. Because something like this is probably going to happen again. Especially now that one of the big streamers has proven just how much attention you can get by presenting people with a gap in their knowledge. How do you solve the problem of the internet when that problem is part of the reason that people are paying attention?